0, answering the question, will Donald Trump's legal entanglements be a deciding factor in the 2024 presidential election?
U.S. President Joe Biden and I have a few things in common. For starters, we both enjoy spending our Fridays talking about the election, albeit he's probably doing it in a lot nicer of a room, and I do it in front of hundreds of people. But second, we're both major fans of Britney Spears' hit song, Baby One More Time. But no, the president doesn't have my horrible luck when it comes to getting a follow-up call after a date. Rather, he's talking to the American electorate, asking them, hey, vote for me one more time. That's because, as CBS News explains on February 4th of this year, the 2024 election is closer and closer with every upcoming day. But this also comes amidst a backdrop of former President Donald Trump's legal troubles. As that same source reports, currently, there are over 4 legal detainments that the former president is involved with. One within the hush money case, another within classified documents, and 2 other ones focusing on separate election interference cases. And considering that 538 reported just earlier this morning that a mere 35% of Americans have faith in our democracy. And then also, this upcoming election isn't just a referendum on Trump or Biden, but an election that will decide everything. Our rights to make decisions about our own bodies, the issue of gun control, the opioid crisis, and more. It is for the sake of democracy that we must ask today's question. Will former President Donald Trump's legal entailments be a defining issue in the 2024 presidential election? To which the answer is actually a resounding yes, because it shows that he doesn't support the issues that matter most to voters. And in some ways, it actually bolsters his campaign. And we can understand how in 3 key ways. First, by taking a look at the economics of it. Second, how it shows he's against healthcare. But third and finally, because it turns off the most moderate voters. Now recently, President Biden has tried to toot an accomplishment within his 3 years of presidency. That being that under his term, over 13.5 million jobs were added. Well, let's be honest, at least half of those jobs were Trump team lawyers. As our first point explains, those lawyers may have actually helped, because as our first point, this has only given former President Donald Trump's campaign an economic boost. That's what Politico furthers on January 24th of this year, where they found that originally at the start of the year, former President Donald Trump was lagging President Biden by over $100 million when it came to campaign efforts. What we've seen over the past 2 months, both in April and May, is that he's caught up. Today, those campaigns are respectively $170 million with President Biden and the DNC, and $150 million with the RNC and former President Donald Trump apart, meaning that there are near $20 million. This means that former President Donald Trump is catching up quick. But why is money so important in the first place? Well, as furthered by an analysis by NBC News on May 14th of this year, that's because it gives former President Donald Trump the ammunition he needs to expand his campaign. While President Biden has aired hundreds of ads in battleground states like Pennsylvania and Georgia, former President Donald Trump has not aired a single one. But now, he has the opportunity to switch his election fortunes by focusing on creating new battleground sites within areas like Pennsylvania and Georgia with the rise of different offices, but also to invest in new ads as well. Now, former President Donald Trump recently stated that he is most definitely on the side of women. And in all fairness, when was the last time that President Joe Biden gave a woman $83 million? As our second point explains, his stance on healthcare and also the criminal indictments tying into this demonstrate that former President Donald Trump will utilize this as a defining issue in the 2024 election. That's what the Kaiser Family Foundation explains to us on June 5th of this year, where they found that when they polled over 61 battleground congressional districts, what they found was that actually 45% of independents support some form of a pro-choice policy, policies that we commonly associate with the Biden administration. This comes amidst a backdrop in which over 5 different states across the union, including states like Colorado, but also Montana and Florida, are all putting abortion through referendums on the state ballot. That raises the question, where do his legal attainments tie in to any of this? Well, as NPR furthers on January 5th of this year, that comes within the E. Jean Carroll case, in which former President Donald Trump paid out over $83.3 million due to settlements because he was accused of sexual abuse. Sure, back in 2016, we saw different high-profile cases like the Access Hollywood tapes, but we never saw evidence that he was directly hurting Americans. Today, women across the country know not only that he's abused women like E. Jean Carroll, but he is also staunchly in support of a 15-week abortion ban, adding fuel to the fire and demonstrating to millions of Americans that he's not the president for them, because a president protects their health care, not impairs it. Now, in American politics, we may commonly focus on the most extremist fringes, but at the end of the day, the voters that decide elections are those in the middle. And that's precisely what our third point aims to address, how it will turn off the most moderate voters. That's what's furthered by the New York Times on March 14th of this year, where they found that, essentially, over the past few years, we've seen a rise within what's known as double haters, essentially voters that both won't vote for the former president or current President Joe Biden. And after his criminal indictment earlier this year on 34 different felony counts, it was found that over 46% of voters said that they would not vote for former President Donald Trump. But they didn't necessarily indicate their support for President Biden either, which is exactly why the Voters Initiative explains on May 14th of this year that this could indicate that these double voters could simply step out of the election altogether. But why is that so critical in the first place? As that same source continues, it was found that in 2016, it was in the battleground states in which we saw the most turnout. In fact, their turnout was 18% higher than the rest of the nation. Meaning that if these voters that can easily decide the fate of the presidential election sit out because of his legal attainments, that could mean that a win can be passed to President Biden. Now, ultimately, in my culture, there's a saying that the word crisis has 2 meanings. Hui, meaning crisis, and Ji, meaning opportunity. With every crisis like the one we face right now, where faith in democracy is at a record low, we've also seen democracy prevail, bringing to light legal attainments involved with the former president. So ultimately, this time around, voters will have a choice at the election polls, whether to give former President Donald Trump or President Biden one more time in the White House.
Our second speaker will be cross-examined by speaker code 5592.
So, starting at the top with that first point on Trump fundraising off of his legal opportunities. First and foremost, how do we know that this fully came from small dollar donations or anything linked to his legal troubles? Because he also hosted over 100 billionaires at Mar-a-Lago during that same fundraising period, and they gave him hundreds of millions of dollars.
Well, just look at the data. Former President Donald Trump saw his best campaigning days when it came to fundraisers right after his criminal indictments were released and when he was charged on felony counts. What we've seen is that the most extremist blocks of his party are coming out in droves to support him, fundraising his efforts for money that he can use to appeal to more moderate voters.
Well, let's be clear, he's on his second best fundraising day after the Mar-a-Lago fundraiser. But even on top of that, in 2016, Hillary outspent Trump 2-1, and she still lost. Biden outspent Trump in 2020 4-1, and he barely won the election. How can we really be sure that money's the deciding factor in who wins anyways?
Here's the difference right now. It's because of the fact that grassroots campaigns are the issues that help win elections. The thing is that right now, former President Donald Trump isn't even going on airways. He has no presence in states like Georgia and Pennsylvania. The RNC also had a recent shakeup, which means that campaign offices have again and again been gutted. Sure, back in 2016, both former President Donald Trump and Hillary had some sort of presence. But right now, the former president doesn't have any.
I'm glad you brought up the RNC, because while Trump campaign itself might not be running ads in those states, the RNC and Trump campaign merged, and they are. So let's be clear, there is still GOP activity. But with our last 30 seconds, I want to jump on to your second point. How does Trump's E. Jean Carroll ruling at all relate to abortion access? These are two entirely different situations.
It erodes voters' trust that former President Donald Trump can be a good ally for women. They don't want to vote for someone who has been found in courts to be sexually assaulting a woman. If he can't even respect women's bodies, what's to say that he will respect millions of women across the
And when he said he didn't respect them in 2016, why would it be different this time around?
Because back then, that was just a simple tape with Access Hollywood. But now, the courts have made it clear. Donald Trump does not stand